concerned, you know, your father was the vice president of our country for many years under what Liberians sometimes call Tubmanism. So during that time, was he comfortable in that position? When you consider the changes that he really artistically tried to bring forth to move the country into a new direction, I wonder whether that was just a sudden relapse or change of mind, or was it something that was paining him all along and just the opportunity came, you know, etc. I don't know whether you would like to share some light on this. And then the other one, you mentioned about 5 groups in a vision. If you don't mind, I would like to know about the other 4 groups. And third, you mentioned a name George Bully who visited you. Is that the same George Bully that is linked to the LPC during this wartime? Is that one, my third? And the issue of money and greed. I noticed you mentioned that some of the soldiers said that now we can get our $25,000. Well, the history will say that this war was just motivated by people who wanted to be liberated from a leadership that was corrupt. But now here are the key implementers of this coup thinking about money business. So somebody had to have the money to give it to them. So it means that we need to start looking at who had that money and who was really concerned about using the greed or simplicity of the people to overthrow the government. So those are some of my 4 or 5 questions I'd like for you to add light on.
Please remind me if I forget any one of them. I wasn't writing.
Yes,
but my father was vice president, and I believe he was loyal to Tubman, and that was the right thing to do. He believed, and I believe, that a person as a head of state, you know, is a position that granted by God, and nobody should. There's a way, there's a legal and right way to get people out of power. And he was patient to wait until his term came as president. I think one of my father's speeches when he was in high school, he felt that he would be president of Liberia. So he went through the rank. And so during Tubman time, no doubt there were things that he wanted to change. But he changed, you know, you can be the change you want right around where you are. So where my father lived, where he worked, people he worked with, just ask them what type of person he was. He did that change right around himself. Even where in his office he had people from different groups working with him, different ethnic groups. So it's not that he didn't try to implement some of those changes where he worked. He did. Punctuality at his work, you know, among his children, studying hard. Those are the things that he instilled in us. Now, I'm sure he was anxious to make changes, and so that's what he did. They call him Speedy because he was changing fast and trying to change things fast, but obviously lots of people thought it wasn't fast enough. So that's all I can say. That's
the first one. Second was, but the group you said a friend of yours or family member had a vision?
Yes, I don't think, many of them, some of them are dead now. It's not necessary to call names, I think. Because you see, what I believe that many of us had part to play in this school. It's not that the person who did the shooting is the only one that is to blame. But what about people that sat down and saw things happening and said nothing? What about people who watched the execution and rejoiced and danced in the street? How can you execute 13 human beings like dogs, worse than dogs? And then I was told the day after the execution, a cousin of mine and another fellow came to our house, to Mrs. DeShiel's house, Seda DeShiel. Seda was married to Leonard DeShiel, and they sat down and said, I will never forget that. That was some of the torture that they had put up. They were looking for 100 more poles to put out. They couldn't find the 100 poles, so they just used the 13 they could find. And all my male relatives were in prison, every one of them. except a few, were not all, most of them were in prison. But all my brothers, they were all in prison. So they were going to kill 100 people plus. So you need to look and find out who are those people that were motivated. And they say they had a change. What change they were looking for to destroy people like that? So I'm not going to call names because I have another thing I want to read out here. All there is for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. I don't know who wrote that, but it's a saying that all there is for the triumph of evil is for good men, I included women and men, to do nothing. What happened in Liberia? People sat by. I mean, I remember when they killed my father. Did I see anybody to come and bring me water to even say, sorry? Maybe they were afraid, yes, but they still could have launched a complaint. This is wrong. You know, and when April 14 took place, 1979, when my husband gave a speech to the soldier when he was resigning as Minister of Defense. He said, the story was rat trap, not for right alone. And many people have repeated it in different form and fashion. He wrote the story out, and my daughter illustrated the book because she's an artist. But in this book, it was trying to tell Liberians, warning them that the trap you're setting for a group of people like Tolbert and his government, it's not just for them. It will affect Liberia from many years down the road. And this is exactly what happened. When the coup took place, they said, oh, it's just the Tolbert family. Whole lot of things. We were crazy, we were this, we were that. They stripped people naked. Some of my family members, they stripped them. They had to roll in the street. Some of them, they were raped. Some of them, bandit was stuck in their flesh. A lady crippled, she was pushed down the steps and died. In 1 month, so many of my family members were killed. My father, and with 28 people that were brave enough to fight, were all put in one mass grave, and his body is still there. And people say, oh, it's just them. My goodness, Liberians. I'm not going to call the full group. It's not necessary. Many people stood by and watched. And the government, Doe took on lots of Bacchus, Matthew, all these church people, all those people were part of this. They organized it. They must not put the blame only on Doe. They helped to destroy Liberia. And so we need to have them in front of this tribunal and in front of Liberia to say the part they play, acknowledge it, and ask for forgiveness. That's how our country will be saved. So I'm sorry, I don't want to call the names.
No,
I don't think it would do any justice.
Yeah, I agree with you. The next one was about, is this bully the same bully that...
George Bully, he was Minister of State for Presidential Affairs. Oh. That George Bully. And the same church people that killed his own foster father for whatever reason.
Okay, and the last
And
one.
George Bully came, and in my presence, when he came to our house, we were on a house arrest, he had the nerve to tell me that my father sent him. He said, you know what, your father sent you to school. He paid my way through school, and your brother gave me the first pair of shoes, Bill Tolbert. And those boys that came to our house when we were at Leonard Tishi's house, they kept saying the junior will never live. People talk about AB. They had planned to kill every one of us like the Russian Revolution. He kept saying, don't you know the Russian Revolution? Randall McLean, he asked forgiveness for coming and doing that to us. But I'll call his name because, not that I have nothing against him. He was hanging with some of those boys. So he came and he revealed things to us that was frightening. And that day, I don't know what, I lost it that day. He said that, don't you know that the junior will never live? So I already knew that A.B. would die. I was on a house arrest when they caught my brother. And the night before, I dreamed that they caught my brother, and I dreamed that he was killed. So when they caught my brother, I cried the whole day. But and I went to visit him in prison on 18th of July on his birthday. Joe gave us permission to go and visit him. And I visited him, and he shared the power of God, that he was sorry that, he said he couldn't stay still. He had to find out about his mother. He said, I said, why did you talk on the telephone? See, now they caught you. He said, you know what? First of all, he couldn't leave the country. He said, I didn't want to leave. My mother was still here. I didn't know what was happening to my mother. And he was so eager to find out the safety of his family and so on. That's why he called, and that's when they caught him. But they killed him and buried him half alive. Kuriampa, when he came to America, he wrote an article in, I think it was Newsweek, and I kept the article, but I don't know, I lost the paper, moving from one house to the next. But in this paper, he described that they took A.B. out and told them to dig their grave. And while they were digging their grave, they shot them. And they covered him when he was still mourning. And up to this day, we don't know where my brother's grave is. If anybody knows, could they please tell us? We'd like to put a monument there. And we'd also like to put a monument where my father was buried. And we want permission now. Hopefully, they will grant us the permission.